Welcome to Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives like you can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. Have you ever wondered what it truly means to be creative? We often think of creativity as the realm of artists, writers, and designers, those who master the hard skills of drawing, painting, and crafting prose. But creativity extends far beyond design. It's a force that drives innovation in every field, from technology to business, from marketing to problem solving. Think about the last time you faced a challenging problem. Did you approach it with a fresh perspective? Did you come up with a solution that wasn't immediately obvious? That's creativity at work. Creativity isn't just about the ability to create something visually stunning. It's also about the ability to see the world differently and find unique solutions to everyday problems. Today, we're going to dive into the world of creative problem solving, an often overlooked aspect of creativity that is just as vital as artistic talent. We'll explore how thinking outside the box can lead to groundbreaking ideas and success, especially in industries where results are everything. So, how do you harness this form of creativity? How do you train yourself to see beyond the obvious and find those hidden solutions? Our guest today is an expert in doing just that. John Rich believes that everyone has a sense of creativity, even if it doesn't manifest in traditional ways. As a marketer and PR professional, John is responsible for capturing people's attention and delivering results through unique and engaging ideas. Whether it's creating an eye-catching ad on LinkedIn or pitching a compelling story to a reporter, his creativity is all about making an impact. John's approach to creativity will offer valuable insights for all of us, whether you're a creative professional looking to enhance your skills, a marketer aiming to stand out in a crowded field, or someone seeking new ways to solve everyday challenges. So I'm excited to welcome John to the show. Thank you so much for being here, and I am excited about this conversation.
Hey, Jen, thanks for having me. I am well. That was an incredible opening monologue. I love the way you framed that. So I'm ready to go.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so before we jump into the deep end, let's take time to get to know you and maybe talk about maybe your earliest memories of realizing you had a creative streak, and maybe were there influences in your childhood that you remember that kind of made you go, I'm creative, but it looks different.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'd never been the typical art person. My wife is a million times better drawer than I am. I mean, I may be a master to stick figure at best. So, I always knew at an early age that I didn't necessarily have the artistic ability. Earlier on when I was, kind of a toddler, I got into music, loved music, still love music to this day. Kind of love thinking and kind of like investigating how music is made, how, the structure of it, all that. So that was kind of my first glimpse into kind of some sort of creativity. But, I was always an athlete growing up. And so that kind of took my focus. And so how I really came into being creative was when I started working in my career. So I'll give you a really quick background of my career. Went to school at James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and then moved up to DC, about 2 hours away, Washington, DC, and worked in politics. And worked on the Hill, which was an incredible experience, for better or worse, understood how that whole system works, right? And so it was after when I moved to starting doing strategic communication firms and started working with clients, nothing was linear, right? I think in school you're kind of taught
Yes.
very linear things and how to do it, and then you quickly realize that nothing's linear. And so when you go out into the real world, you're not given this playbook. You kind of have to think outside the box. And so very early on, it was difficult for me to really kind of explore my creativity in some of the problem solving ways, right? I think when you're young, you're more in the camp of I don't want to make mistakes versus how do I blow it out, right? How do I add all this value? And so admittedly, it took a while to really kind of break out of that mold. But in working with professionals who have been doing it for a year, I got a really good opportunity to work at a small firm that worked with tech clients. And so I was able to get on some of those calls with some of these kind of higher level tech people in Washington, D.C. offices, and working alongside the partners at the firm, in understanding how they approach problems, being in some of these sessions where they're kind of brainstorming, hey, this campaign is, we're launching this product or we're launching this newsletter. Here's some things we can do. Here are people we can talk to. And just being part of the brainstorms
Mm-hmm.
were really eye-opening for me and really kind of helped molded how to approach problems, essentially.
All right, so you went from, a non-linear viewpoint of the world to, taking that and making it work for you in PR and marketing. Like, why PR and marketing? And y'all do get a bad rap, no offense. People think that y'all are out to suck souls and to cheat people out of their time and money, but I think it's so important because you have to be able to tell a story so quickly to keep people's attention. And it's a skill that some of us really wish we had. Even though we can write 120,000 word books, we can't just grab somebody's attention in a moment. So, like, how did you land in that world?
I haven't really given much thought to it. I kind of just settled into it. Truthfully, a mentor of mine, brought me to that same small firm I was talking about, and I just kind of settled into the role. I think working in DC, I was, hey, do I do policy stuff? Do I try and be that nerd where I'm trying to affect policy and I'm trying to create good things? And ultimately, that's not where I wanted to go. And so the other side was, hey, there's all these really interesting problems in policy. Again, we're not talking politics, but like how things work,
Yeah.
law, what's the best case? And a friend's girlfriend at the time, now wife, was like, you should do communications, right? I mean, you can talk about all these things, you can still dive into the issue areas you like, but you have more flexibility what you want to do. And so I took that advice and kind of just started working on it. And then again, it just year after year after year, a little before you know, I'm 7 years in, I'm doing PR and marketing campaigns. And it just kind of took off from there. I, as a PR and marketer, I think things have changed now substantially in what I do, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But now PR and marketing to me and how I define it isn't necessarily marketing to get clients or to get paid. It's not as much retail, right? I work in kind of more of a brand amplifying space where I'm trying to raise someone's brand, raise awareness, kind of, create thought leadership. I personally don't like that term. I think it's a little overused personally. So I'm trying to find of a good synonym for it. If you have one, I'm open to it. I'll
I'll
give you
have to
the
think
credit.
about it. Yeah.
If you want, I'll give you credit. But it's really nowadays it's about creating content. It's about being interesting. It's about, driving a conversation and being part of a larger conversation within a community of people. And that's really what I'm trying to do with who I work with. And that's where it's going, especially with social media and everything.
It really is. And it's so hard because people, and this is a conversation that I've had multiple times, especially for smaller businesses or indie artists and that kind of thing, which is a lot of what my network is and my community is a bunch of indie artists, and
Yeah.
they're out there trying to create a brand, a name for themselves. They're trying to put themselves out there, and to do it, they start trying to look like everybody else in the business. They're trying to look like everybody else, and they try to do the same thing. And I'm like, no, you want yourself to stand out. You want
Yeah.
your work to, your voice to be your own and to be unique while also still being authentic. And so that is such a hard balance to find, especially for those of us who are creatively minded, but suck at the marketing side of things because we just see what everybody else is doing and that's what we want to do.
Yeah. 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 I love that you said to be authentic, because I think especially now as there's more technology involved, it's just so crowded. I think people can very quickly find out if you're being authentic or not.
Yes.
I mean, like as soon as we started speaking, I was like, you're a great person. I can tell you're original, you're authentic, like it was a great connection. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's very easy for people, even through a screen, even through a social media post. And so I think that's 100% accurate. Authenticity is the most important aspect right now.
Oh, for sure. Okay, so in like PR and marketing, even like you have to, it requires really quick thinking and problem solving, which for some of us, that is not something we're gifted at, because we like to think about things. We get lost in our imagination.
Mhm.
So, what's one of your favorite challenging situations that you can think of that you faced that, and what was your creative process like getting through it that you had to think quickly on your feet? And how do you level up those skills even?
Yeah. So with anything, to level anything up, like working out, you just have to do it, and you can't be afraid, right? I mean, you just got to
Mm,
start picking up the weight. If you want bigger bicep,
hmm.
you just got to start picking it
That's
up. It
it.
could be 1 pound or 10 pounds or 50. And so what I try and do with PR, I think is incredibly important, is to have a process, right? And just because, I tend to be I can be a little ADD, ADHD, where I can go off, and I'm sure all creative people, I'm sure everyone's like that, right?
Yeah.
Where you can just quickly go off in a tangent if you don't stay focused. And so when I address challenges, it's very important to be goal focused. What are the goals are we trying to do, right? So for instance, if writing a book or short stories or whatnot, what is the goal? It's ultimately to sell, write the book or to create sales.
Mhm.
And then so we'll tear it down from organizational goals or your personal goals of selling. And then we'll kind of say, okay, well, to achieve that, what are some of our media goals? Who are we, and who's the audience? Who are we trying to impact? And so I think a lot of PR people would probably say the same thing, right? Say, hey, let's focus on goals. Let's go. What media goals do we have? What audience? And so, for instance, one client I'm working on right now, they're selling a kind of a tech stack in real estate. It's basically it's this backend system similar to a CRM that has a lot of backend capabilities for realtors and recruiting and
Nice.
prospecting, right? And so they're focused on creating a deal in the Phoenix area. They're hoping to sell, and so you know they only have 3 months, which is really it's not that it's not a lot. They're currently working a demo through them, and so we're trying to help them out. But basically, thinking through, all right, who are we trying to impact? We're trying to impact few individuals, which any PR person can say that's really, really hard. While we can talk to them, we can't find a way to specifically talk to them. That's like finding a needle in a haystack. You can find their information, their email. You can even find out where their office is, but to target that with a PR campaign is really difficult, right? So we have to look at how are we going to fill their ecosystem and fill their kind of their small like geofenced community of things, right? So that's how do we talk to some of those local newspapers? Do we do a paid campaign directly to them? That could come off actually not great because
Right.
they could see that and be like, oh, he's trying to sway me, or
Mhm.
this feels artificial. And so what we're trying to do now is essentially um, get my client on a bunch of different podcasts, talk to smaller publications and start creating this brand really quickly, and just create a little momentum, and hopefully in 3 months we can get them to a spot where he walks in with some credibility. He can have some of these interesting viewpoints. We can pre-brief the potential customer with whether it's thought pieces, op-eds, or blogs, or hey, I've talked about this. So it's almost trying to triangulate in
Mhm.
this particular sense the person, the locality, and then again being interesting. So
I think that translates well to a lot of, in my case, authors, but also other creatives. But you have to know who are you writing for, and you have to understand that your work is not meant for every person out there who picks up a book. Like it's just not. Your art is not. I am not going to look at Picasso's work and be like, "That's amazing." I don't like it. I think it's tacky, and that's okay. Just because I don't like it, somebody else may love it.
yeah,
I look at Starry Night, and I think, oh, I could stand here and stare at this forever.
Mhm.
Not your art is not meant for every person out there taking in art, and so you do have to identify those people that it's meant for, even in the creative world, because otherwise you were just putting stuff out into a void that's going to suck it up, and then you have lost a whole lot of energy and time that you have poured into the work that you're putting out there.
For sure. No, I agree, and especially with the to your point, I think you put it well. You want to write to a specific audience or write to a specific person, but it may not reach that person.
Yeah.
And so you may kind of gravitate and get other people around that person or that target core. And hopefully at some point it'll get to that person. But and this is kind of in line with impressions versus conversions, right? I
Ooh.
listened to an interesting podcast the other day, about how this one agency person had their optimized their SEO campaigns or search engine optimization. I'm sure your audience may or may not know that,
Eh.
but basically optimized it for impressions and getting organic traffic. And he said, well, we're going to start switching to conversions. And so while that may minimize some of the impressions they get to their website, they're getting more high value conversions, which are turning into contracts
Mhm.
or opportunities, right? And so it's understanding who you're talking to, and then making sure you're creating enough of a critical mass that it finally reaches them at some point.
And that is something that we need to educate ourselves on more. And unfortunately, it's really hard because there are so many terms. Like I know what SEO is, but the fact that I'm glad that you expounded on that because not everybody does. Because you see all these things, and you're like, crap, I don't know how to do anything with an SEO. That means nothing to me. Conversions, clicks, impressions. It gets so confusing, and
Yeah.
everybody's like, "Hey, if you pay me, I'll do it." And I'm like, if I could pay you to do it, I would, but thank you
Yeah.
very much. I need to sell more books so that I can pay you to do it. So it's like this really
Yeah.
bad merry-go-round that we get on sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I often I'm having to tell myself, I just started my own firm,
Oof.
and it's it's important for me. I live my life to be self-aware. I'm like, as a human, I need to be self-aware. If I'm going
Yes.
to criticize someone, I have to, have a standard myself, or I can't be a hypocrite, right? But I know that as a PR person, I am a nice to have. I'm not a need to have, right? You can make the argument that over time you'll see a better ROI if you encompass PR strategies or someone like me. But it's a nice to have, right? And so if if I can provide some value, and I could show you through some of these tactics, in building a brand, which I think organic brand building is so much more important than
So
marketing.
important.
It's a little more resilient, it lasts longer, and you can continue to build off it. So
I agree. So do you offer courses or do you have a book or something that you could provide, or is that something you want to do in the future to help people like little old me to understand these things better?
I think maybe in the future. I'll be honest. I have a decade experience, and so I don't think I'm a college grad when it comes to
Yeah.
these things. But there also are people in the biz that have been doing this for much longer, that are much better than I am. And I'm every day. I think with anything you do, you should be learning every single day.
Yes.
I've been struggling to find it, but there was one chart I saw that to me is so, not it's so impactful in the sense of, like, I know little, right? You think initially you're like, I don't know much. And then you go up to be like, I know everything. And then over time you're like, whoa, I don't know anything. And to me, that's so profound, because it's the truth. I only like to speak on things that I really know well. And things I know well, I'm like, there's so much more I need to learn about this. And so that is all to say, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 5, 10 years, when people are continuing to seek me out and I'm doing really well, it's like, all right, well, maybe I do have something to say. But right now I'm going to continue learning and just focus on, my core goal in my business, which is helping smaller firms, startups that necessarily don't have the manpower, and just help them out with some of the basics of, like LinkedIn, social media, building up their brand. That's kind of what I'm focused on right now.
Are you focused at all on helping other creatives kind of build their brands as well? Is that something you would venture into? Because it's a lot less corporate. It requires a lot more, out there loudness a little bit, depending on the author or the artist. But is that something you also work with?
Sure. I mean, I would. I just, this is why I'm kind of starting to lean into more the creative aspect of it, and kind of understanding creatives a little more, is just because I think nowadays content is going towards what is interesting, and are you interesting? What are you talking about? Right. As an author, I'd love to read your content in your books, and what you're writing, but I also want to understand, the philosophy behind it. What's your
Yeah.
process look like? How in your life, how did that shape you to write this book? What experiences? To me, that's what people want to hear. And then from a PR and marketing standpoint, the more you can talk about those interesting stories, not just the story you wrote, but the story about you as a person, you're going to get more attention. People are going to buy your books because, they have a connection with you. And so certainly I'm open to it. I'd be open to it, but really anyone that has an interesting story to tell, or an interesting product, to sell, I think that's kind of what I would like to do for now. So
That's awesome. No, that's great because there's a big need for that as well. I know that for a lot of us, like, I mentioned earlier, I write very long books. I write a lot of words. But when somebody says, "Tell me about your book," I just stand there and I'm like, what it was about. I honestly
yeah,
can't tell you. I mean, I could tell you word for word. I could tell you the whole thing, but don't ask me to summarize it because I can't. I just cannot.
yeah,
And the same is kind of true for myself too. I'm like, what I think is interesting about me, you probably wouldn't find that interesting about me. And so sometimes I have to think long and hard about it. But that is something that just in the last month, I have somebody, I have a virtual assistant who has been a godsend. And she has said, hey, let's do a Q&A. Like, I ask questions, you give me answers, I will post those answers. And it has been the most engagement I've ever had on on social media, and I'm like, I don't know if it's you or if I'm more interesting than I thought, but that is something that people actually gravitate to. I had no idea because I don't think I'm that interesting, but other people disagree.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll be honest, I was never a big social media person. I still don't post on social
Yeah.
media just because I don't like to do it. I'm more of a
Yes.
private person. That's just me. Again, now that I'm starting my own company, I'll probably have to reverse course on that.
Uh-huh.
Um, but again, I think people want human interactions. I think social media can sometimes, whether it's memes, all these random influencers, all
Yes.
these different things, people are seeking truth. They're seeking authenticity. And
Hmm.
so the more you can kind of put yourself out there with whatever you're comfortable with in an authentic, original way, I think you're going to get, you or whoever are going to get a lot more results.
No, I agree completely. Okay, so we kind of talked about, I made a mention in the opening about hard skills, but there are people who don't have these hard creative skills. They have these soft creative skills. So how can we help individuals identify and cultivate these skills and help them realize that they are creative, even if they don't think they're creative?
It's a great question. So I can only speak from my experience, and so I hopefully people, your audience, can take away from this. But my father, was, I think he's obviously the best salesman, right? I look up to him, but I've always kind of, I don't know, I've just had traits from him as a salesperson, and so I've always known that connecting with people, talking with people, the small talk, selling, being very friendly, I've come to learn over time what my strengths are as a
Mm,
professional, right? And that's being kind, that's being approachable, that's asking questions, that's listening, just trying to connect with people. And so um, I don't know how necessarily I stumbled onto this, but again, I realized that this was my strength. And so I always try to leverage that as much as possible, right? And so whether that's, meeting new people, interacting with clients who I can kind of build a connection with, joke around, talk about, kind of really help build that trust so that when I'm, helping them out on a project or a campaign, I can ask them honest questions, or I won't be afraid to ask them dumb questions because, I'm getting to the heart of the matter. So to me, that's a soft skill, right? A
mhm.
hard skill, again, is drawing or math or science, some of those hard technical skills. A soft skill to me is being able to connect with people, interacting, being friendly. And so I just learned over time that that was my strength, and I leveraged it, whether that was maintaining a job, getting a promotion, making friends, meeting my wife, things of that nature. And so again, I would consider that being creative, because especially as we get older and as young people tend to gravitate towards their phones, carrying a conversation and being in person and being able to hold a really good, meaningful conversation, I think is going to be more and more important as we get older.
I agree. It was so sweet. I had a conversation. I think she was 79 or 80 years old. She was on the show and she was talking about how the art of actual communication
Yeah.
is just basically dead. And I told her I relate a story about, my daughter is 14 and I feel like she was born knowing how to use technology. Like a cell phone didn't come out with her when she was born, but at the same time, it was almost like as soon as she saw one, she knew what to do with it. It's wild. But
Yeah.
that has also been a drawback. Yes, we set limits and that kind of thing, but her personal interactions with people are so stilted sometimes and a little stunted and so awkward. And granted, she's a homeschool kid, so that's on me. She's also a little weird. It just is what it is. But we tell her embrace your weird, and she attracts the weird ones, and I love their little weird group. But
Yeah.
their conversations are held through the screen so often because they are at home doing school. They don't go to school around each other, that they have forgotten how to talk to each other. And so when I watch them, I'm like, that's worse than I was in middle school. And I was awkward in middle school and I went to public school. So, it's just like the screens have really ruined a whole lot of that communication ability. So, those are definitely skills that everybody needs to develop, even if you don't love people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in developing some of the soft, like creative skills, I think you just kind of have to do it, right? You
Yeah.
kind of have to be afraid
Yes.
to fail. And, tomorrow's a new day.
Yep.
I think a lot, especially when you're younger, I have a 5 and 6 year old, and we essentially homeschool them. We send them to like a co-op kind of
Yeah.
environment. And one of their main tenets is fail early, fail often, right? Or like kind of like low leverage failure, essentially, where, you're not failing like you're you're gonna lose your house or something, right? It's like feeling like, oh, a friend may yell at me, or I may break something, or and so developing soft skills that aren't necessarily the creative writing, or you can develop those too, but going out, if you want to start your own business like I did, you have to be a salesperson, and you just have to
Yes.
go out and talk to people. You have to go into some of these pitches, create maybe an awful pitch deck, and you get feedback. And guess what? They may say no. The odds are you're going to say no. They're going to say no multiple times, but you're
Yep.
going to learn every single opportunity you get. You're going to learn. And so again, in that instance, whether it's pitching me as a vendor, I have created pitch decks. I've iterated on them. I know exactly what people need to hear, and in doing more and more of these pitches, I'm able to pick up kind of what their needs are, and then I can quickly alter kind of my offering or some of my services, or my proposal to them. For instance, this may not seem like a big deal, but to me it was, because this was my first client I landed. It's an AI company based in Denver, and I was talking to the guy, great guy. You can tell he's very deep, very like esoteric, just kind of like really thoughtful. And so we got matched through a marketplace where I basically paid for a warm lead. And so knowing this, I knew that he wasn't going to sign a contract with me on the first Zoom call, right? That's just obvious. And so as we're talking more and more, I'm kind of getting the sense that he's kind of leery. He's like, okay, you're saying the right things. Like, man, like, I don't know if we really need PR. And, I was like, well, listen, what if I just work essentially for free and we could pay like per deliverable, right? So if I get you on a show, or if I get you an interview, or if I get this, you can pay me a little more. Would that make sense to you? And he was like, oh, that's a really great idea. And again, that's not I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm not
Right.
creating anything new, but in the moment, it was a really quick pivot to say, hey, I can read this person. I understand they're not really feeling it. Let's quickly think of another solution. And I still got him in, and I'm still working with him, and it's been a pretty fruitful relationship. So just that one quick pivot of learning to read people and being able to kind of think of something else, I think has paid dividends.
Yes, exactly. I think, and if you can make a person feel important, and not like in a fake way, but genuinely invest in a person, and that is one way to do it, to know what they're thinking, to be able to say, you know what, I'm making you uncomfortable right now.
Yep.
Let's redirect. Let's try something different. Like that, it is so important. And I get sometimes we're so wrapped up in ourselves that we tend to forget other people exist, and we do have this mindset of it's all about me and what I need and what I want. Read the room. There's a reason that's a phrase. Like read
Yes.
the room and get
Yes.
to know the people that you're working with, because sometimes you are offering the wrong thing to the wrong people. That may work in a different room, but if this isn't the room where it's going to work, by all means pivot. I love that word because I do it all the time. I also think of the Friends reference, and it's just one of those visuals that I will always have in my mind, because sometimes that's all you can do is pivot, and sometimes the pivot doesn't work, but you've tried. And you do have to be willing to take that risk sometimes. But read the room.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm trying to teach that to my 5-year-olds. Yeah, I think
Oh,
6-year-olds, and I know he's only 6, but I'm like, hey, buddy, you got to read a room. Like, I know that comes with time. I'm 36, so I got 30 years on him. Yeah, I agree. It's and especially working in my fields, it's you really need to think of. You need to take a step back and say, okay,
yes.
I may be working for this client, but who's the person that I really need to kind of make sure is happy? Who's and so it's kind of being strategic in the sense of I need to have some of these soft skills to make sure I'm communicating the back end with clients, and then maybe doing something else different, or I need to read this person in. It's understanding, it's reading the room, it's understanding who's
Mhm.
in the room, and ultimately how am I going to make these people happy, right? And each person's different. So
Yes, and I think that can apply over to the creative side of things for authors in my case. You can advertise or market the same exact book to three different audiences, just about,
mhm.
depending on the tropes you have or depending on the themes you have, whatever the case may be. Figure out who you're trying to attract to your book. And at the same time, you have to be consistent, because if you're going to be, there has to be a consistent thread, I guess, throughout all of that.
Yep.
And people can always come back to, she really hooked me here, but she's the same person selling to all three crowds. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's one of those things that you can, I
Yep.
guess that's why they have A/B testing when it comes to your ads and and stuff. You're marketing the same book, just
Yeah.
sometimes to two different audiences.
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so John, tell us something that you are most excited about in what you're currently working on, what you have next, what you want to offer people.
Sure. So, I would love to act as an inspiration to people, your audience, about they're thinking about whether it's writing a book, whether like, hey, I want to start painting on the side, or I want to, create some music just in my spare time and get on YouTube and start strumming a guitar. I think I've had a lot of incredible bosses. I've worked with a lot of incredible people, but ultimately now that I have two young boys, and a growing family, I've just wanted to try and go and working on my own, right? I had this sense where I needed to stay in this lane in some of my other jobs. Where it's like I need to stay in this lane. This client wants this. My client wants X.
Mm.
Now that I'm working, by myself for myself, I'm able to offer a whole bunch of different solutions. I can actually say my outlook on marketing and PR, what I truly believe about the industry and has to be done versus thinking about what my boss is going to say. Like, hey, my boss, we only do writing, we only do content, we only do media pitching. Now I can offer something different, and so it's been really rewarding. It's been very liberating. It's made me kind of rethink um, life in general, and I know I'm not the first person to start my own business, so I'm not pretending to be this, like this person, but it's been really exciting. And I would encourage everyone to just try something, right? I think
Mm.
one of my favorite sayings is it could be, it could be one day or it could be day one. And
Oh.
so I think that's really impactful. And I just want people to strive and go for it. I mean, ultimately, your success will be measured on what you enjoy doing. We work for, what is it, 80% of our life we're actually spent working, right? And so why would you want to work for something you don't like doing? I know it's a lot easier said than done, but where there's a will, there's a way. And I would just hope that
Mhm.
everyone just write that book down, or write that song, or jot lyrics down and send it to a producer, and maybe send it to 100 people, but one person reads it. Who knows? You never know. And so I guess if that could inspire someone in your audience just to do it, I mean, that really would be great.
I love that. Okay, so we're to the point of the show where we're going to flip the script, and I'm going to put you in charge of the show. So you are now the host of Connected Conversations for Creatives.
Okay. Well, Jen, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I am doing well, thank you.
Well, we're going to jump right in it. As a creative, as someone that's an author, an accomplished author that has put many words together more than I have. In the last 5 to 10 years, there has been a lot of chatter about this thing called ChatGPT. I don't know. Have you heard of OpenAI and ChatGPT? Have you heard of it?
Yes, I've nicknamed mine Frank because he is frank with me quite regularly. So yeah, I have.
He's not afraid to be honest. That's good. I think,
Yes.
as an author, I have my thoughts, but I would love to hear your thoughts. I would say ChatGPT or AI in general has really, the generative aspect has really taken off. And I think that's really what AI is known for to this point. It's growing. Even I use it to write social media posts, to
Mhm.
research things like that. So, as someone who makes a living or a partial living on writing words, how do you view ChatGPT in your profession?
I love it, and I'm in the minority here. I use it at least 3 times a day for something, and it's because sometimes I am so caught up in writing a formal something or other that I can't be creative, or vice versa. Like if I'm trying to make a podcast description, oh my gosh, that to me, I'm just like, it's like summarizing the book. Don't ask me to do it. I know what we talked about. I know how I felt when we talked about it. But
Yeah,
sometimes I'm like, hey, Frank, will you do me a favor and take this transcript and turn it into a podcast description because I got nothing.
yeah,
And, I go back and tweak it. It's not always the words of ChatGPT going into the description, but it's a great tool. And I think that's where we get lost. We sometimes think that it's the end all be all, and that and some people do use it incorrectly. They use it to do all the work. But when you take that human element out, it's quite obvious. And
yeah.
so I think there's that other layer of it there, but it's a fantastic tool and I use it all the time.
Well, that's great. I guess you kind of answered my question, but I'll ask it. Will Frank ever replace you as an author, you think?
No, and I will tell you why. Because Frank has a limited ability to, like, there's no nuance in his words. And it's one of the, like, he likes words like stark contrast. He uses that phrase all the time. And I'm going, dude, leave it out. Or there was another one, like he reused it over and I'm like, will you please exclude this word from your
Yeah.
vocabulary? Like, do not use it again. I cannot stand it. And so there are just some things that no, again, and it's that human element that, he doesn't understand human relationships. He doesn't understand human emotions. And so he can put the words there, but there is a whole lot of feeling left out of it. And I know for a fact, I picked up a book at the beginning of the year. I started reading it and I thought, this has so much potential, but I recognize that phrase. I recognize that phrase.
Mm.
All because I have seen it and I thought, hmm, that's, there's clearly AI having been used to write this book. And so, you can tell. People can tell. Authors, readers can tell. Just saying.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, like we talked about it earlier. AI, I think, is a great tool
Hmm.
to help you, but I think even like Sam Altman said this recently. Said humans will value humans interaction as
Yes.
AI, grows. Humans are going to value that,
Hmm.
and I also feel like as an author, AI or ChatGPT or Frank is not gonna like know the nuances of, oh, I'm gonna put this twist in this book, or I'm gonna try and pull on this. I don't know what the process is of like when you're actually writing something, a long form. The
Hmm.
longest piece I've ever written was like 800 words, right? And so that's as far as I can go. I can track that, but I mean, when you're trying to put twists or turns in a story or in a plot, I feel like AI probably can't grasp that, and not to the depth as a human as you could.
Oh yeah, no, there are so many limitations. Again, I love using it as a jumping off point. If there's something, okay, so here was an example that a couple months ago I was trying to phrase something and I kept wording it like I would say it and I thought this is coming from like he's supposed to be the character is like a 23-year-old guy and I'm like I've never been. I never will be. I have no idea what this would exactly sound like in his head. And I said, "All right, I have this phrase, make it sound like a 23-year-old guy." And he did. And I was like, that sounds more like a surfer dude from California. Let's try 26-year-old. Because Frank doesn't know what a 23-year-old guy sounds like either, apparently. But he got closer and closer than I really could have. And so he helped me reword something I was working on. But at the same time, it was just one of those things that he really didn't know what I was asking either. So limitations are clearly there. But it was a fantastic exercise in helping me say, okay, next time I now know what direction I would take that in if I was doing it again.
Yeah, yeah, and as someone that has worked with conversational AI companies, I think at least right now, in this moment in time of where we are interacting with AI, is really difficult because it's all in natural language. There's probably, a very small relative percentage of people that can interact via coding, architecture, that can, maybe more specifically say, no, machine do this, but do this, do this. Right now, you and I and authors and creative people can only operate them with natural language, and so it's really hard. To your point, translate this into a 23-year-old surfer person from, Long Beach in New York
Yeah.
versus what's the difference in LA versus and so there's so many nuances that maybe the machine does know, but we can't communicate it with them. And so
Yes.
I actually agree with your outlook that AI, while it'll be incredibly helpful, I don't think, at least in the foreseeable future, will ever replace humans as authors or some of these other tasks.
No, and I know people have tried it. Like I said, I read that one book, and I know people see it as a quick and easy way to sell a book. But I promise you, people aren't going to come back for your second book if that's how you throw it out there. They're not going to come back for the next one if they see that all you're doing it because anybody can do that. Anybody can say, "Hey, ChatGPT, write me a story about," and it will. And you
Yeah.
can even go through and edit it a little bit. But if your goal is to be a prolific author that people are drawn to and you want your stories to make a difference and have meaning, just write it yourself. Just write
Yeah.
it yourself.
Yeah. I know, I agree. And I mean, how is like a ChatGPT author, going to write like a thing like Game of Thrones, right? I mean, there are so many,
Yes.
like the Red Wedding and all these other, like how could a machine think to be like, this is something that no one would ever expect. Like, there's no way a machine could, tap into that. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe it
Nope,
can, but it
it
doesn't
can't.
seem like it. And I'll give you another example too. I use it often But I wanted to write a piece. I forget exactly what it was about. Something tech. I forget exactly. Um, but the writing was so good. The writing was so good. And I was like, they know my client especially, but like they're gonna know it's not me. I'm not this good of a writer. I don't use these big words. Like, right. Like, and that's another thing too. I have and one more example for me is like, my college friends, when I wrote essays, they'd actually make fun of me with some of the words I used in a college essay. And I wasn't great at writing. I did okay in school. But I've gotten better, right? And so I think I'm an okay writer now. But yeah, GPT used these incredible sentences, and all I say, I'm like, no one writes like this because it's like perfect, and, you know what I mean? And so it's I don't know if you've experienced that or if you've read that or
Yes. Well, and I do like it because I can throw out maybe a couple of paragraphs and be like, did I get the sentence structure right, or is my punctuation okay? And so I'll get a feedback on that kind of thing. But no, it is too perfect when it throws words back. I'm like, that is not the dialogue that I would have used in that situation, or there's definitely a disconnect on what it should look like and also if it's for a presentation, this is something else. And it's in the GPT's voice and not your voice, and then you go to present it, it's going to be very obvious that you didn't write that those are not your thoughts, that is not it's going to take away from the lilt of your words, and so your presentation will come across as somebody else's, and it is. It's not yours. It is somebody else's.
yeah, I agree. Well, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
And this may or may not break our friendship, may make or break our friendship
That's
here.
okay. I'll get you back later. Go ahead.
Is how do you feel about the Oxford comma as a writer?
If you don't use the Oxford comma, we cannot be friends.
Okay, all right. Well, it looks like we'll be friends then.
Okay, good. That's hilarious. It's a valid question. It is a valid question that it is a hill that I will die on. I also do not put double spaces after my ends of sentences. Like I cannot. Why would you do that? That makes no sense to me.
Well,
But
you're also
that's
not a 70-year-old person that so like I get it, but yeah, no, we're on the same page. We can be friends.
That's hilarious. That is such a question I've never been asked before, and I'm so glad you asked it because that is so funny. I actually yesterday my coffee cup it says Oxford Comma Club. Like it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I've had spirited debates with my bosses, my colleagues about using it, right? Because when you write press releases, there's AP
Mm-hmm.
style, there's all
Mm-hmm.
these different writing styles, and so there's been spirited debates about random things, including the Oxford comma. some strong emotions.
I will end this friendship right now.
I'll walk out this room.
It was actually part of my wedding vows. No, I'm just kidding. Like I vow to use the Oxford comma at all times. I do. That's so funny. Okay, so I am going to take the reins back to the show just so that I can ask you. I've got two more questions. One is, how can listeners connect with you and your work?
Well, my name is John Rich. My firm is A Rich Opinion. So Twitter at A Rich Opinion. Same thing with LinkedIn, and my website is at arichopinion.com. Typically, what I blog about is some of my thoughts on best practices, whether that's technical things such as writing press releases, marketing strategies, or high-level thoughts on where the industry is going. And what I also like to do in some of my blogs is test some of my theories that I ask my clients to do. So, for instance, certain keywords, SEO. I'll be starting a video series soon. And so if you just go and follow my social media, you can get a lot more of me.
Nice, fantastic. And we'll put it all in the show notes. So all they have to do is go over and click a single link and it'll take them wherever they want to go.
Love it.
And now I do have one final question for you. It's the big question. It's pass or fail. So are you ready?
I hope I can do it. I hope I pass. I hope I
I
pass.
do too. Only because it would be really embarrassing if you didn't, because nobody's ever failed before. So here we go,
Oh no,
John.
I kind of want to feel this.
First time for everything. Okay, what is one piece of advice or encouragement you want listeners to walk away with if they hear nothing else?
I said it before. Just go and do it. Life is
Mm,
short. It's take a chance. I think if you fail, you will learn so much more about yourself and what you've done than not trying it. Again, I'm trying to start my own thing, and if in a year I can't feed my kids, then I'll just go find a full-time job. It's not the end of the world. Tomorrow's a new day. Just go for it. Why not?
Yes.
Enjoy life.
I love that. The only time that it's too late is when you're dead. It's never too late to take that next step, to do the next thing. Yeah, is it scary sometimes? But it could be the best thing you've ever done. But
For
you won't know
sure.
if you don't take the step.
My dad has always said, once you're comfortable, like you need to move on.
Ooh,
Like you need to constantly be uncomfortable. That's the only way you're going to grow as a human, as a father, as a professional, as a friend. So be uncomfortable, go for it.
I love that. John, thank you so much for this conversation. It was all over the place, and at the same time, I think it was exactly what everybody needed to hear, because you can pull technical, logistical, creative, inspirational. Like, if they leave without hearing something useful, that's on them, not on us.
I appreciate it. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.